Hi guys, welcome to Movie Outline. Today, I will describe a film called Antlers. But before we start, warning, this is spoiler content. Watch out. The movie begins by showing a former coal mining site that has been closed for a long time. There a child was seen waiting for his father to finish work. He is Aiden and his father's name is Frank. Frank asked Aiden to wait for him a little longer before they went to pick up his brother Lucas. He never knew what his father was doing there because he wasn't allowed to see it work in person. Then, inside the place, Frank, who was packing things with his friends, suddenly they heard a strange sound that distracted them from their work.
Still got plenty of you on that batch. The fuck was that?
Frank, who was curious, immediately went down the hall to check the source of the sound, followed by his friend. They tried to examine every corner of the darkness, but all they found were hanging ancient talismans. Suddenly they were surprised by the attack of a mysterious creature because the place was very dark. Then a fight ensued, causing Frank's friend to die on the spot. Outside, Aiden, who heard his father's loud scream, became curious about what was going on in there. Then he slowly walked inside to check it out.
Daddy?
3 weeks later, the scene shows Lucas studying at his school. Lucas is a quiet student and sometimes he becomes the target of bullying by his classmate named Clint. Clint thinks Lucas is a weird kid, so he always bothers him whenever they meet. Furthermore, in the middle of studying, a teacher named Julia asked Lucas to give an example of an American folklore or a myth that he knew. Through the pictures in his book, Lucas tells a story about a bear family consisting of a big bear, a small bear, and a baby bear. The big bear and baby bear got sick, so no one looked for meat for them to eat. The only best thing they have right now is just love for each other. Then, after class was over, all the students rushed to get their bags outside. But something funny happened here. Clint found dog droppings near his bag, which made him very angry. He realized that this was Lucas doing. Lucas just smiled at the angry Clint. Then Clint beat him and told him to inhale the smell of dog poo up close. After that, Lucas was taken to the health room for examination, but when the nurse asked him how he was, Lucas said that he was fine. Hearing that, Julia immediately allowed him to go home. Then secretly she tried to contact Lucas's family at home, but there was no answer. After that, when Julia was about to go home, she saw Lucas standing behind the glass window of the ice cream shop. Julia felt sorry for him. Then he invited Lucas to come in and treat him to eat ice cream there. Julia tries to get to know Lucas better by asking a few things about his family's situation. However, Lucas only said about his little brother, who was always with his father at home, and his mother had long passed away. After that, he immediately left because he felt uncomfortable with all of Julia's questions. On the way, he found the carcass of a raccoon. Then he took the fresh meat to take home. Meanwhile, Julia, who is still curious about Lucas' life, goes ahead of him to his house to look for information, but there wasn't much he could find there other than the moans of someone running amok.
Hello?
Julia realized that something was wrong in the house, so she immediately returned to her car and left the place. Then after Lucas got home, he gave the meat to someone who looked like a zombie. It turns out that he is his father, who has been suffering from a mysterious illness since returning from mining. Aiden was there with him too, and Lucas just gave him some crackers to eat. They can't get much if they only rely on Lucas, who is still a kid. Elsewhere, Julia, playing the piano, is thinking about her dark past. Julia is a woman who has long left the city of Oregon. At this time she just returned from California. She supports living at the house of her brother, who is a sheriff named Paul, and in this house the bad experience happened. Julia, who is still a teenager, always receives bad treatment from her father. After that, Paul showed up to talk to her. In the conversation they discussed about Frank Weaver. Julia said something wasn't right at Frank's house. However, Paul was not surprised by what Julia said, because he had long suspected Frank of being a drug dealer. But he can't catch him because if Frank goes to jail, then no one can take care of Lucas and Aiden. In addition, the Protection Service also considers that Frank is the right guardian for them. The next morning, Lucas tried to catch animals by setting a noose in the forest. Suddenly, he saw someone named Stokes who found a human carcass with empty stomach organs. Then he immediately left that place. Stokes reported his findings to Paul and they immediately autopsied the body. The forensic doctor said that this corpse died not because it was eaten by wild animals, because he found human bite marks on the corpse. But Paul doubted the doctor's words. At school, Julia reports what she knows about Lucas to the principal named Ellen. And she also brought a clue, namely the terrible drawing made by Lucas. She tried to say that Lucas was a child victim of violence, and the picture was an expression of crying for help. Since the beginning, Julia had been interested in Lucas because she suspected that there was something wrong with him. Then, Ellen didn't say much, but she heard Julia's report and she's going to be in touch with Lucas' father soon. In the next scene, Ellen goes to visit Lucas's house to meet Frank. However, she found no one there. She forced her way into the house calling out Frank's name, but there was no answer. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a child's cry coming from the room above. Ellen immediately checked it there and she found little Aiden, who looked very wrinkled and skinny, sitting hugging his knees. Ellen, who felt sorry, immediately asked what Frank had done to him. But before Aiden could answer, Frank appeared from behind, attacking Ellen. Ellen tried to fight him off, but Frank's strength was too strong and he immediately bit Ellen's throat to death. Aiden was just silent while hiding to see what his father was doing. Then, Frank's behavior suddenly became wilder, with his chest burning as he screamed while looking up. Scene back to Lucas, who is walking home. Then suddenly Clint appeared in front of him, insulting him. It seems he still has a grudge against Lucas after what happened the other day at school. Lucas tries to apologize, but Clint refuses. Clint looks like he wants to beat Lucas a second time, but before that happened, a monster suddenly appeared facing Clint and instantly killed him. That's right, he is Lucas' father with his new body. Let's call him Frank Monster. After that, Lucas immediately ran to his house. When he got there, he was surprised to find a lot of blood splattered on the floor. Lucas seemed to notice something and he immediately cleaned it up. Meanwhile, Paul, who was inspecting the mines, received a missing persons report, and the person in question was Ellen. Then he tried to ask Julia in hopes that she would know something about this. As expected, Julia says that she asked Ellen to speak to Frank Weaver about Lucas. Without wasting any time, Paul immediately went with his partner to Frank's house. But after getting there, no one showed up, even though Paul called Frank's name. The next morning, Paul again received a missing persons report, and this time it was about Clint. Paul tries to calm things down and hopes that all this is just a coincidence. He promises that he will find them soon. However, Julia doesn't seem to like Paul's calm demeanor. Then she chose to act alone and went straight to Frank's house to prove it. Sure enough, her suspicions all this time, there she found Ellen's car, which was covered by a waterproof car blanket. Long story short, now Paul and all his colleagues have been at Frank's house. There they found many traces of children and Frank's corpse, but Aiden wasn't there. Then Lucas suddenly came. Julia immediately hugged him to calm him down. Lucas was taken to the hospital to be treated as well as being examined both physically and mentally. Doctors said that Lucas was severely dehydrated, suffering from chronic malnutrition, and was showing a mental crisis. The doctor suggested that he be hospitalized for some time. On the bed, Lucas remembered the time when all this started. At that time, Frank, the father who had just returned from the mines, suffered from a strange disease, and his illness made his health deteriorate and act wild. Frank asked Lucas to lock him in the upstairs room and never open the door no matter what Frank did. But one day, Aiden fell ill, so Lucas had to open the door to tell his father. Frank immediately pulled Aiden to stay by his side. Poor Lucas, there was nothing he could do then. He was devastated by everything that happened in his life. In the next scene, Paul and Julia go to Stokes to ask about the horns he found and a picture that Lucas made. Stokes said that it was the horn of a Wendigo, a legendary creature that preyed on humans, and now they are angry. The only way to kill the creature is to remove the heart from its body. After they finished talking to Stokes, they intended to go home, but on the way Paul received a report about the discovery of a body. Paul's colleague said that the identity of the corpse was confirmed to be Clint. Paul hoped that Clint's death was caused by being struck by a train, but in fact the forensic doctor said the same thing that happened to Ellen. But Paul is still skeptical about this fact. Daniel, one of Paul's colleagues, asked what was really going on, but Paul still wasn't sure what he knew. Paul whispers to Julia that he doesn't believe in myths and believes there is a logical explanation for this case. But when Julia asked for an explanation about Ellen, Frank, and Aiden, Paul didn't say anything. After that, they went to the hospital to bring Lucas back to his house. After arriving home, Julia told Lucas about his dark past and about her father who hanged himself. Then slowly she told Lucas that his father had died, but Lucas denied it by saying that the corpse they found was not his father but his father's old body. He also says that his new dad is with Aiden right now, but Aiden doesn't understand that, and he needs Lucas. Meanwhile, Daniel, who was on guard outside the house, suddenly heard the sound of a child screaming. Then he went behind the house to check it out. In the warehouse, he found Aiden hiding under a pile of cloth. Then he immediately alerted Paul, but suddenly Frank Monster stabbed him in the back. Daniel died instantly, causing Paul to panic because he didn't get an answer from their communication. Paul immediately increased the speed of his car so he could get to the house quickly. Inside the house, Julia and Lucas try to hide to be safe from the Frank Monster attack. Then, Paul, who had just arrived, went straight to inspect the warehouse. But inside the house, Lucas even ran out. Paul walked slowly towards the warehouse. There he found Daniel, who was dead. He also saw that Aiden was still there. Then the Frank Monster attacked again until Paul was thrown into the corner of the warehouse. He also stabbed Paul until he fainted. Frank Monster thought that Paul was dead, so he left the place. After that, Julia came out of the house and found Paul, who was unconscious. She wakes up Paul and says she has to go to the mines to help Lucas. Then, they went straight to it. Arriving there, Julia walked down the dark alley until she found Lucas and Aiden hiding behind the wood. She also saw Frank Monster eating Bear. A fight ensued between them, but it seems that Frank Monster is in a weak condition, so Julia is quite capable of fighting it. Julia took an iron rod and stabbed it into Frank Monster's chest, but he still tried to attack. Then Lucas helped Julia and stabbed Frank Monster from behind until he fell down. Seeing that, Julia immediately rushed to tear him stomach and take out him heart, and Frank had been killed. But suddenly Aiden shouted very loudly. When Julia saw him, she realized that Aiden had experienced the same thing as Frank. Later, Lucas told Julia that Aiden would be fine, he was just sick, and Lucas promised to take care of him. But Julia insists that Aiden will never get better and it's too late for Aiden. Finally Lucas could understand, then he averted his eyes from Aiden. Meanwhile, Julia hugged Aiden and stabbed him in the back repeatedly while apologizing.
I'm so sorry.
The next day, they were enjoying the view on a lake. Julia says that they have to take care of Lucas for now. Paul had some doubts about Julia's decision, but he didn't reject it either. Then, when they were about to go home, Paul kept coughing and had a strange expression, and the movie ends. Subscribe to watch the next video, and leave a like to help this channel up. Thanks for watching.